Hello, everyone. Welcome to Food for Thought on a windy March afternoon. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm going to start by introducing, I'm going to start by letting you know that after 2 years with the Nantucket Historical Association and seeing all of your friendly, happy faces every week, I have some sort of sad news. You're going to be in very capable hands from here on out, but today is actually my last Food for Thought lecture, as I'll be moving on to other parts of New England from here on out. It's been a pleasure to see all of you every week. I feel I've gotten to know the island through our Food for Thought lecture series. I learned some things that I would not normally have gained experience in or knowledge of on my own. And I also feel like I've seen all of you every week, and that was a really wonderful, friendly experience, not only here, but also out in the community. So I just wanted to let you know about that. So from here, we still have a great series of lectures this spring, starting next week and all the way into May. And Marjan Shirzad, the Director of Visitor Experience, will be here to introduce our speakers on a weekly basis. Today, we have lectures from right here in the Nantucket Historical Association. We'll be joined by Ben Simons, the Chief Curator, and also by Georgen Charnes, who is an archivist and librarian at the NHA Research Library. They're going to tell you about the digitization project that we've been undertaking in recent months for manuscripts, journals, films, and other rarely seen NHA collections. So please join me in welcoming Ben Simons.
Thank you all for coming out, and thanks for coming. We were scheduled earlier in the year and got stormed out, so we're glad to be giving our presentation. Georgen, I'll turn it over to Georgen shortly, but I just wanted to say that this presentation is about all aspects of digitization at the NHA, and that means really taking physical material and turning it into a digital format so that for many, many uses, both access to it online, but in publications, in exhibitions, and really creating a public tie to the material that we have and that we protect and hold in the public trust. Digitization is complex, as you'll see. We had a great presentation by the Athenaeum about the digitization of the newspapers, which are now searchable online, and we'll hear about that. But I wanted to say that Georgen and I have both been here over 10 years at the NHA, and we joke internally that there's a pre-Georgen and a post-Georgen world. Don't blush. Her time here has seen incredible advances in digitization of, in particular, the research library holdings. We've also done a lot of work photographing and getting web access to the artifact collections, and we'll talk about those also. But you'll hear some stories about how we got there in certain areas of the collections. In many cases, it was strategically planned and sought out. In some cases, it was more fortuitous how we arrived at projects to digitize our collections. But now I'll turn it over to Georgen, and she'll explain the broad picture of digitization. Not an easy word to say.
Thank you. If you're here for the yoga speaker, she's not here. But we could do some yoga, I guess, at the end. Well, as Ben so kindly said, thank you. I'm Georgen Charnes, and I work over at the Research Library. The mission statement of the NHA is to preserve and interpret the history of Nantucket Island and foster the appreciation of its historic significance. And to that end, we try to make the material, we try to collect and then make the materials that we have accessible to a lot of people. Now, a lot of people who use our materials are off island, so that's why I've really tried to focus on digitization so hard. What is digitization? Converting analog items to digital files for viewing on computers. and then it can be put online. Now, a lot of people, I mean, there's nothing to replace the original document. I mean, let's face it, there's nothing like handling the books and the papers. The paper from the 18th century is so much better than the paper now, and the ink, there's definitely a great sensation. But if you're in Germany, or if you're in Harvard, and you want to look at some of this material, it's great that it's digitized. So why do we do that? One thing is for preservation reasons. Now it does not, it does not really save the thing, but it's less handling of the original. Being an archivist, it's kind of a quandary. I want people to come and use the materials, but every time they use them, it's a little more degradation, a little more light, a little more handling, a little more chance that it's going to be filed in the wrong place. And if you file anything in the wrong place in an archive, it's gone. It's going to be very difficult to find. So it's a lot of staff time. And of course, we do live on an island 30 miles out in sea, so it's hard for people to get here. So less handling of the original. And we also store the digitized version in different places. So we have one copy in the library and one copy out at Gosnold. If something happens to the original, we do have a virtual copy. So and we also put them sometimes on the web, and they can be cloud storage or online storage. So it just is a little more security for that reason. Access is greatly improved. When I first got here, people would call and they'd want a photograph, and they'd say, I want that one of the little girl near the train who looks like she's waving. And then Ralph would make a photocopy of the photograph and then fax it to the person. You know, she'd like several. Which one do you want? So now we have such great access that we do get international use of our image and collections. Databases, they know that if all they have to do is call, and we will send them a JPEG, and then we send them an invoice later. But you know, if somebody says I've got to talk now, I mean, I can give it to them while they're still on the phone. And the publications that are using them, Germany, New Zealand, this is in the last year. It's been published in Germany, New Zealand. HBO has called. Rick Burns has been here making a film. Or that was the year before, wasn't it? I'm lost. And again, it helps people who are off island do research. Outreach, it allows people to know what we have, as opposed to having to come in between 12 and 4 on a work day. They can search our database, and they can email us if they have a question. You can use it at any time of the day or night, although watch out opening our databases, because it's so interesting. You'll be there for quite a while looking up family members or your house or some street. Or it also, I have gotten donations from people because they did go into the database and look around. They said, you know, I've got something that could be included there. And exhibitions and publications, it just makes everything much easier to get it out there and let people know what we have. And then I often get the question of what do we digitize, or how do we prioritize what we digitize. One of the main things is the photographic collections. Once it's scanned and cataloged, it's in the database. We have over 23,000 records now. And the photographic collection here at the NHA includes all formats of material. We have glass plate negatives, cyanotypes, daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, tin types, albumins, everything, and we can digitize them. One thing I really loved is I put these 3 pictures on here because they're from 3 different donors who are unaware of each other. It's the same person. So, you know, with a good cataloging, I put her name on there. You can just click on that name. It's hot, and all of these images come up. It's just, it's very interesting. How do we prioritize? Well, I have a list of things in the backlog, and I want to get the glass, of priorities. I need to get the glass plate negatives done first. But then also, if somebody comes in, we still have material that's not digitized. We have binders of photographs. Before 1997, people photocopied the photographs and then put it in binders organized by subject. And so if somebody comes in and says, I really want this one, then we'll fill that order. But otherwise, then I also, new things that are coming in are being digitized too, so that we don't have to do that extra step of photocopying and putting it in the binders. So new stuff that comes in, I guess, is my first. Orders, and then my backlog, I have like a list of priorities. We also collect, digitize selections from the manuscript collections. Now, so some logs I have scanned comprehensively, the entire thing. And when I scan an entire thing, I will scan the cover, the inside of the cover, the flyleaf, because if you leave it out, people don't know whether you left it out accidentally or, you know, there was something on there and you left it out accidentally. So I just do the whole thing. And, but not all of them are scanned comprehensively. It's a very time-consuming thing, and sometimes I have to go by the condition. If something is bound really tightly, then it's not going to do it any good to be put on the scanner. Of course, if I digitize it, maybe people don't ever have to look at the original, but I don't feel like that's true for logs. I feel like if somebody comes to look at a log, they want to look at the original log. But we have some that are just really stellar and very interesting with illustrations and interesting narratives. So or they're on display here. If they're on display here, I like to comprehensively scan them so a researcher can have access to them while it's on display. Something else that's digitized is the Barney genealogical record. Now that's not scanned. That is actually a database that Betsy started when she worked here. The Barney genealogical record is a bunch of notebooks with genealogical information that this woman in the 19th century, Eliza Starbuck Barney, wrote down. A lot of our vitals were destroyed in the fire and took a lot of digging. So she gathered a lot of information, and Betsy started this database, one of those genealogical databases. And now it's online, and I add pictures periodically, and it's very, very helpful. We get a lot of users on that too. We also have images of the artifact collection online. Now, this is actually, the one that's online is actually selections of the collection database. We have a bigger database out at Gosnold, but they're not all photographed yet, and they're not all finished. So if you don't see it in the collections database, we may still have it. Whereas the photographic collection, well, I guess that's true for it too, because we don't have everything digitized yet. So it's not everything in our coffers, but it's a lot of them. And we also have audio taped oral histories. I had a bunch of cassette tapes all over the place. And so I got them together and gave them a number and wrote a grant for a CPC and had those audio tapes digitized. And those are actually on our server. So if you find it in the database, say if you look up Kenny Holgate Sr., you then click at the bottom, it says available online, and you click on it, and it will start to play. And that's very nice because that kind of format of material is there's so many formats of material. There's audio tapes, there's videotapes, there's DVD, there's CD, there's jump drives, it gets overwhelming. I like having it in just one format that I can make available to people, especially these voices. I was sitting at home testing this, and I clicked on the Kenny Holgate Sr. one, and my husband, that's my husband's stepfather, and he was like, "That's Dad!" I mean, the voices of people are just so powerful to hear and to be captured. And we have some from the 1930s that were done, and we have some from the 1950s and 1960s. And rather than sitting on a shelf, they're still there. I mean, you can still go look at them, but it's now available through the database. And we have films. I wrote a grant for the CPC. If you ever get a chance, if you ever ask you to vote yes or no on the CPC funds, vote yes. Because it's just so wonderful to have these home movies available. I put them up on a YouTube channel. I should probably show that. So if you go to YouTube, it is the Nantucket History Channel. This was one that came in not too long ago of the United Spanish War Veterans, and they had a parade. And I think actually this one goes through Martha's Vineyard first. We don't want to see Martha's Vineyard. Go on. So there we go. So this was nice because I could, I could look up in the Athenaeum's newspaper archive when exactly it was, and interestingly enough, not 2 weeks after I got this, I got a totally unrelated set of pictures from this parade. That kind of thing happens all the time. So these were, I should show you this, the sea serpent. So I see there's 44 films up there now. This is a good one, though. Let me try to find the sea serpent, though. One of the first ones I put on. There it is, the first one. So this was in 1937. Have you all heard the story of the sea serpent too many times? They, for several weeks before, in 1937, in early August, the INM kept running articles about that a sea serpent had been spotted, and there were footprints on the sand. They'd have pictures of of men next to these footprints, and oh, what is it? And then he floated this, he designed Macy's Day balloons, and he had a shop here in Nantucket. And I guess they were aiming for jetties, but I guess the trajectory of floating monster balloons was difficult. So it was on South Beach, which right where the kayaks are, right around there, there's some houses built in the way now, but right around where the kayaks are for rent on Washington. So that's where that was. And it was in color. Oops, going into another one. Well, that's all right. So these are very engaging to get out there, and I've gotten some more images too, some more home movies. There's nothing like images. And great. So you have to visit our YouTube channel. How do you get it to go back to them? Yeah. So we have, oh, and I just got a lot of material digitized, including Stackpole's television series from the 80s. Was anybody here during the 80s? Do you remember Edward? He came on the local access channel, and he, it was varying topics. He had, history of the waterfront is one, and some of it's just interesting houses. And my colleagues have heard me cursing in my office because he'll show a house and he'll tell the entire history of it, but he won't tell me the address. So I have to kind of figure out where he's at. If he's walking down Liberty, I can, pull up the Google map and figure out what the house number is, because of course I have to think about when people sit down at the cataloging, they're going to type in an address. So I want that to come up anyway. It's fun. It's amusing. And oral histories and lectures like this. So the digitization process, how do we do it? Our number one thing is in-house photographing or scanning. This is Tony up here in the left. He is scanning. He takes a lot of photographs with overhead because he does the artifacts. He's at the collection manager at Gosnold, so he's doing photographs of furniture or paintings. So he uses a regular digital camera a lot. Ralph and I tend to use flatbed scanners. Really, you can use pretty much any of them, unless you're doing glass plate negatives. Those are large format negatives, so you have to get a certain kind of scanner. Only it's a little more expensive than just the regular one that you have on top of your printer, and we use them a lot. And the other person is Peter McLaughlin, who was here. He was one of the first people to start scanning. There were others as well, other staff members before us who scanned and cataloged, of course. But he made photographic copies of a lot of our collections, which has served us for access for years before we came along with our computers. And so we scan them in-house, and then we catalog them in-house. So they're scanned twice, once as an uncompressed TIFF or PNG, which has a lot more digital information, and then once as a JPEG. The JPEG really typically answers all our needs, even for publishers. Occasionally, a publisher will say, I want a really high quality, and we can take that uncompressed TIFF or PNG off of the DVD and send it to them. And occasionally, Ben will want it so that he can blow it up 5 feet tall. And that's the only time we really need to rescan at a really high resolution. But those are very special cases. We also employ third-party photography, Jeff Allen and other photographers, Novation Media. Oh, and you want to talk about Tim Matthews? Yeah.
One portion of this is that it's great for us to be doing a lot of this in-house, and we do as much as we can. For instance, Georgen has just scanned the complete Nickerson journal from the Wreck of the Essex, his account. We own that manuscript. It's actually right behind me, and we don't want people to handle it. So it's great that you've just digitized it. But we can't do everything ourselves. So we're looking for strategies to do more of our collections. And we came across a third-party system and way of doing this. Let me just backtrack a little bit to say that the logbooks, we've digitized completely, I think about 10 total, 9 or 10. But what happened back in, let's see, what year was this? 2007, Ancient History. We had, for one of the issues of Historic Nantucket, which I was putting together, one of the authors is a gentleman named Rod Dixon, an Australian. He had been whaling in his life, and he was a seaman. He was a mariner in modern natural gas tankers. But in his retirement, he got into researching early arrivals of American whale ships to Western Australia. And Rod was very interested in two particular voyages: the voyage of the Asia Nantucket whale ships and the Alliance. Now, the log of the Asia is sitting right behind you there in the case against the wall. It's a very early log. The voyage was 1791. And in those early days, going into those little-known waters, they would often travel in consort. So the Asia traveled with the Alliance together. Now, the whereabouts of the Alliance log was not known. So what happened is that Rod ended up tracking it down to the Cincinnati Public Library. It had turned out that, in the Nantucket's diaspora, families moving away, going to the Midwest, going to the West Coast, it had descended in a family, and they had ended up in Cincinnati, and they had donated it to the Cincinnati Public Library. So Georgen got in touch with the Cincinnati Public Library and asked them if we could digitize, we wanted photocopies, I think initially, I can't remember exactly. But in any case, we both realized that we had one of the two logs from the voyage. And so there was kind of an exchange. And then the Cincinnati Public Library said, well, we have this technology that we can actually scan logbooks. So we'll scan the Alliance and share it with you, and then we can scan the Asia. But if you're sending logs, why don't you send a batch of them? So Georgen packed up 6, I think, very carefully and sent them off to Cincinnati. They scanned the complete collection, and we picked the best, the best of the best. Susan Veter's journal aboard the Nauticon, Edward Carey, Lexington, some of the real classics of our log collection. And so then we kind of said, that's great. We have these 6 logs digitized, but we have 400 logs and journals in the collection. So what now? In the meantime, we were contacted by a gentleman named Hal Espo of Contextual Connections. And what Hal does is he goes around to historical repositories and collections and says, listen, I want to put you in touch. There are these businesses, they're nonprofits, they're businesses, but they work with libraries and universities, and they bundle together topics. So if you're interested in, say, the gold rush, you don't have to go to every little historical association that has some material on the gold rush. You can go through them or through the university that you subscribe to and access all of the material at once. And there's also a modest revenue stream for the smaller institutions if they take part in this. So we thought about it. It was kind of new to us. We said, how can they possibly sell these packages? But it turns out that university systems want their researchers to have access to the best material. So they buy them and make them available. Now, let's see. One of the leaders in this area is an English company called Adam Matthew Digital. And they pick topics all across the board, as you can see. And they go around and find repositories to enter into agreements with, and they bundle packages together. They took a look at our collections and said, we have quite a bit of material on the China trade and Americans entering into the Pacific. And we have a package that is called China, America, and the Pacific. So it's perfect. So we work with them to look through our collections, identify manuscript material in particular, but also artifact collections that are relevant to this. And Nantucket had a very, very short-lived but important engagement with the China trade around 1800 to 1815, roughly. So we have fantastic material. Also, the whale ships were the first to burst into the Pacific and chart many of the islands and have encounters with many of the native peoples of the Pacific. So there's great, great resources within our log collections, within our manuscript collections. So we have entered into an agreement on China and the Pacific, and we're now looking at doing tourism. It's kind of a no-brainer for our collections. Postcards alone are spectacular, but all of the video, all of the correspondence, everything to do. Hotel signs, we have a great business sign collection, for instance. We're also looking at a package called Global Commodities, which doesn't sound as interesting, but it's about global economics. And we have a lot of account books that relate to that, and so on. So this is a way for us to get our material digitized. They do it. There's no cost to us. We get the files, and we actually get some revenue, at least potentially. So it's a complete win-win for all parties involved. And it also expands the reach of our collections because all of these things are listed in global university systems. So, I mean, as much as people can come to our website and find us globally, they also, researchers may not find us that way. They may find us through universities or library systems. So it's a great way to expand the reach of our collections, and audience and outreach is one of our strategic goals. So it does a great job of hitting those buttons as well. Georgen, do you want to? Yeah. Yep. It's amdigital.co.uk. And we've just sent them our first batch, so I don't know if our things are up yet, but the packages are already up, and they add to it as they grow. And major institutions, Winter Tour, Mass Historical, American Antiquarian Society, I think the Harvard libraries are involved as well. So it's a big deal, and we're contributing our small part to it.
Thanks, Ben. While I'm over here, I should probably show you the databases and how you can get there. So you go to NHA.org. If you go to Search Collections, you'll come up with this page. So I can search all the collections. So I want to put sorry. So I can search any term in here, and then you just hit enter. So if I just put women in, it'll bring up all the records that have the word women in them. That's going to be a lot of things. So I can also, if I go into the books and AV, I can browse oral histories. So I don't know if this one's online exactly. I think I link this one to Voices of the Fisheries, where you can get it, yeah. So this one links to a Voices from the Fisheries project with NOAA, so you can get the oral history there. Or some of them link to our in-house storage.
Today is November 24th, 1975, and I have the privilege of sitting with you, Margaret Fawcett Barnes,
Can hardly hear it. You can hear it better at home, I think.
3 Traders Lane, here in Nantucket. And you say that you were born.
So we have some available right there online.
All right.
That was weird. So we put sea serpent. Enter. You get all our pictures of the sea serpent and the films and everything just laid out there. And you can click on it and see the bigger image. Uh-huh. Sure. Yes, yes. Well, there's no limit. With the image collection,
2 years ago, on
Wait a second.
last October, this whale washed ashore on the shores of Nantucket Island. When it first
our YouTube channel is going on without me. When we get something in, we catalog it. So it's in our database, and then we scan the image, and then we catalog it and attach the image to the database. And the database it's a very big, you can fuzzy search of all the fields. So I have like a little text description, the discussion, and then we have search terms, and those are also hot, so it's a controlled vocabulary. Hot means you click on it. Wait a minute. I'm used to this computer. So, for instance, down here are the subjects. Beaches, Tony Sarg, Sea Serpent, and South Beach. So then you can click on any of these and it'll bring up anything else that has that subject heading. So they all are individually cataloged. Now with the manuscript collection, sometimes there's a collection description, so the whole collection is described and not individual pieces of paper. But we have pretty good access on that too, because we have lists of correspondence names and dates and everything in there. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Right. True. There's no substitute for actual research, but we do have many of our logs summarized. So, for instance, if I wanted to limit it to a log, and I want to put laundry. So here's one. Thank goodness there's one. You can see. So it has been summarized. So someone has gone in and read that log and put what events were mentioned on there. A lot of these were cataloged by Les Ottinger, who just moved away from the island. So it's not a full text, it's not a transcription, but it's a indexing or a cataloging of the individual item. Did I answer your question? Okay. We also have a program of scan and return. So people who bring in their items that they're not quite ready to part with, will give them to us, and we will scan them and catalog them and give them back to them. We do that especially in conjunction with exhibitions, like we had a big exhibition on Sconset a couple years ago, and that was great. We had people bringing in their family photos, which we could then use for the exhibition and augmenting our historical offerings, and it was very dynamic. It was great. I do this, the staff does this, Ralph does that, and we also have volunteers coming in, scanning and cataloging. I get a lot of high school students every summer from off-island high schools fulfilling their community service project, and then I write them, letters of reference. We get a lot of retired people. Anyone interested in learning to scan and catalog photographs, I have taught people who have never used a computer before. It's not hard at all, and it's sometimes it's a little slow, but it's overall very interesting. Some things that we don't do, we don't have plans to scan every single scrap of paper in the manuscript collection. If somebody sees something in the manuscript collection descriptions and they want, I'm in Connecticut, can you send me a photocopy? I can go in and help them and scan an individual item and send it to them to help with research. But we would have to have a huge staff to have everything scanned. We'd like to have a lot more scanned, but I don't think every stamp is ever going to be scanned. There's no substitute for actual research. We're not going to be making it into complete ready reference. We don't provide scanning services. We don't, or touch-up photographs. That's always, people expect that we're touching up photographs before we put them up, but we don't. We just scan them however they are, and then after they're scanned at a high quality, if later on down the road we want to use them in a publication or an exhibition and we can change them, then we can change them then, or if the client wants to change them. And again, it all comes back to the mission statement of what we're trying to do, trying to preserve and interpret history and provide access. That's all I have. Any questions? Thank you. Yeah. Questions?
Let's start back here.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Give us an idea of a 100-page log, how long that would take to scan.
It would take initially a good few minutes on each page, and then I have to save it twice, and then it depends on what I want to do with it. Sometimes I want to make a nice PDF of it, so that's going to be, another hour. So a 100-page log. I could do it in a day if I don't do anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said there's no desire to scan everything. What percent of all of the documentation that you have do you think would eventually be scanned? What's the goal?
Well, we would have to use a third-party vendor for that, so it depends on the expense. Some of our materials are not going to be wanted by a third-party vendor like Adam Matthews without being paid. The entire, sorry.
I mean, our collections are small enough that in theory, we could aim for 100% or 99%. And that would have to happen through third party, as Georgen was saying. I mean, artifact collections, we say 20,000 artifacts in the collections, and we have at this point images of, we have 7,000 images or more. And so, at the Gosnold, we probably have even more than that, but we're approaching halfway. But we have a lot of archaeological material there, arrowheads, shards. Do you photograph each individual shard? that becomes a question. But in principle, it's an overall goal to aim for a percentage in the high 90s, but that will, particularly with manuscript collections, that will have to happen through third parties, and we're just getting started with that, so it's exciting.
And you have to remember that scanning, it's just one step. People need to know that you have it, you have to catalog it in order for it to be available. Now with the logs, it's not as bad because I would never catalog each page. So I would just catalog the whole thing and say, here's the digital version. But with some of these letters, and the only way to get access to them is to have them cataloged in enough detail that you can access the item itself.
Hi there. I have questions in two separate areas. The first one, the actual scanning. Do you mind telling us what scanners, what flatbeds and film scanners you're using? And are you using software that's coming with them or third-party like Silverfast?
Well, for the flatbeds, we're using Microtech Scan Maker. And the reason we use those is those were the cheapest I could get that could scan glass plate negatives. The negatives are about this big. Mm-hmm. And then I have students working on just the little Ebsons, which the little cheap ones, which are real workhorses. But again, I can't have them do the glass plate negatives. And then the films, I sent it off to George Blood Audio and Video, because I just had no time, and I thought, what do I really want to happen? I said, I want to open a box and then be done. And so that's why I wrote the grant, and I've been very pleased with them. They give me a great product, and right now they're still working on the Edward Stackpole tapes. These were Sony tapes, and they had to really work with them. They were really falling apart, so.
And you probably have video or tapes rather, in all different formats.
All different formats, yeah.
And what about third-party scanning software? Are you using Silverfast or just the Epson?
No.
Just what's
I've just been using the Photoshop, which we may change, yeah.
Well, I mean the actual scanning software, though. You're using whatever's coming with the scanners.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the separate category is the storage. Did you say you are putting things on cloud storage or some things? Or
No, the photographs, no. I would love to have it on cloud storage. We're putting it on gold DVD.
Archival, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I know there are questions on the other side of the room.
I don't know if this is appropriate to ask this question, but when I go to your, am I coming up through now? Yeah, when I go to your website and try to search for an object or put in a search term, very often I get no answer, and I know you have items that should come up. Why is that happen so often?
Well, the catalog, the search terms, it has to be in the cataloging record somewhere. And I put in, let me get it up here. Well, so now the first few fields are simple search of the entire database. So if that word is anywhere on the record, if it's in the description, if it's in the cataloging term, the subject headings, if it's in the donor field, it will come up. But there is, you still have to search a little bit. One trick is to put an asterisk at the end. That's why I say right there, there used to be a whole bunch of search tips here that nobody ever read. I just want one search tip. That is, use an asterisk. So for instance, WHAL asterisk will bring you all records that have the words whales, whaling, whalers, whaleboats, anything. It's a bigger search.
It is a bit tricky. You have to learn some techniques. I mean, it's looking for that exact string that you enter into the line. So if you misspell your name, for instance, Bob, if you say Bob Hellman with one L, it's not going to find you. It's best in general to simplify on a given line. In fact, sea serpent will find just those two words together. If you separate sea on one line and serpent on the other line, you'll find more. You may get things you don't particularly want, but it will get you a broader field.
You see, and then serpent. It's going to look for any record that has the word sea and the word serpent. If I put sea serpent, it's going to check out, bring up the records that only have the word sea right next to serpent. So I always recommend to start with the broadest search you can. Use the asterisks, and then if you get too many hits, you can narrow it down. But it's a very fast database, so too many hits, it's not going to take that long to go through. So sea and serpent brings up 61 records. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes and no, but so often we get nothing when I know
Well, what were you, do you remember what was the last time?
that seem that they are appropriate. You put a word in and you get one thing when you should get dozens.
Well,
Know that.
I know if you put like harpoons, you're only going to get 55 records for harpoons. But if I put in harpoon, you're going to get 109 because it's the S.
It takes a little practice, and it takes occasionally some tricks if it's a proper name. But we're always happy to help with any search, and we're always available to help. Yeah.
Just two questions. One is a simple one. When you scan, how many dots per inch? Like the best you do?
Good question. It depends on the size of the original. My protocol is to have between 3,000 and 5,000 pixels on the longest side. And so like if I scan something big, because I have a big scanner, that's usually going to be 350. I rarely go under 600 PPI. But, if it's a really small thing, like I just had this great album of tin-type gems. They were all these little pictures this big. I scanned those at 2,400. The idea being that I want it to be between 3,000 and 5,000 pixels on the largest side.
Yeah, thanks. Another question, too. If you're aware of other sources of other historical societies who haven't had the ability to scan and things, is there any way to link them up with you? You could, if it's appropriate, bring their stuff in since it relates to stuff here? Do you do that?
Well, I would love to offer that. We don't really have enough staff to do an entire, somebody else's things, but I would love to do like this shipwreck museum, or I did put the Athenaeum's manuscript collection database online, but we started to do a scanning project with them, but they lost the person who was in charge of that. So I have to say yes and no. It depends on how much work they could do on their end, but we're definitely open to helping them.
Yeah, I think that our own collections are our priority, but there are many occasions, for instance, during exhibit preparation, when we request images of other institutions, and a lot of times they don't have them digitized. So we just requested we're using the sea serpent in our summer exhibit. We're using both the film and all of the still images, and we requested the digitized print of the Cape Ann sea serpent from about the same time from a local historical association. And this digitization project here is pretty advanced for a smaller and medium-sized institution. And as Georgen said, we get a lot of compliments from even much larger institutions, but most places are decades behind in terms of their digitization of their collections. So in those cases, they have to take it down from the wall, they had to get their board to approve that the image was shot, and then they had to take the image with a camera that they may or may not have known how to use, and then they send it to us on a disc. And so, not every institution has a different level of funding, sophistication, professional staff, but I think, there have been remarkable strides with a fairly modest staffing and funding levels here. We've done a lot, really. So, but we always like to partner, but I think our collections would be the priority, yeah.
I can give a compliment on a local basis. I've been on the South Church Preservation Board when we did the restoration of the Unitarian Meeting House, the inside trompe-l'oeil paintings. And there was a glass print negative, am I saying it right, of the, when President Lincoln was assassinated, the church was decked out with bunting and a silhouette of Lincoln, and it showed the front of the church. And in doing the painting detail, that glass print was amazing. You were able to take that, blow it up, and give us the detail that the painters used. And if you see it, if you visit the church now, it's phenomenal that they were able to recreate that from that photograph.
And with a high-end user like he was, he just was looking at the database. I said, he wanted, and I said, well, I'll just give you the original TIFF. And so that's what we did for him, because he needed it to look at those details.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are your, given all the experience that you've had now and all the work you've done on digitizing the collections here, what advice would you give to a person who is possibly looking to digitize some of their own family history? I know my father's a photographer, and we have thousands of photos that I've always wanted to take on the project of digitizing things just so my family could have them and in case anything happens, but it just seems like such a daunting task.
It is, yeah.
What are your recommendations for making that process as organized and as efficient as possible?
Well, the first step is, number one, you need to get all the photographs. You'd be surprised how often I hear the story, Aunt Velma had them, and then she died, and they're gone. So you want to get them from whomever it is in your family who has them. The next thing I always recommend is get them out of the attic, get them out of the basement, because that fluctuating temperature and level of humidity is going to destroy them. You can't digitize them unless you have them and they're in good condition. The third thing is get names on them, get names on the back. Can't tell you how many unidentified baby pictures I have. And then the last thing is to start scanning them. And I would recommend naming the file something that is consistent, like maybe a date and then a subject or something that you can then look at the file name and figure out what it is later. There are lots of good programs, a lot of scanners that can do fast scanning, like slide scanners that do it automatically. So, does that answer your question?
One question over here.
Hi. It's not a question, but offering. If you're digitizing by date, reverse it. Today is 2013-03-21, and then your computer will automatically sort them in order. If you do it the other way around, you're just going to be going through your files trying to find stuff because it doesn't pop up.
yes, it's slightly a frustrating automatic feature. Other questions? Well, thank you, Ben and Georgen, for sharing your collections with us. And thanks all of you for being here today, and come back next week. Take care.